Hey guys, it's me, and I'm here today to talk about BlacKkKlansman, directed by Spike Lee, starring John David Washington, Adam Driver, Laura Harrier, Topher Grace, and a few other people you might recognize. It's based on a true story of a man named Ron Stallworth, who was the first black man to be enlisted into the Colorado Springs Police Department. Ron takes it upon himself to infiltrate the local chapter of the Ku Klux Klan in the area in order to find out what exactly they're up to, along with a fellow officer who acts as his surrogate when he goes to meet with the KKK in person, while he, Ron Stallworth, talks to them over the phone. This movie came out in 2018, and for some reason, I missed it. I wasn't really interested in seeing it because I was afraid that it was going to be too cliche and too preachy and too much of standing on its soapbox considering its subject matter and its content. At the time I read the summary on IMDb and I thought, whoa, a black person joining the KKK? How is that possible? But it turns out, no, this is actually a true story, and he did a really smart thing by having a white cop join forces with the KKK in person, because unless the Klan uses blindfolds or when completely blind at that point in time, he couldn't go to meet them in person. That was a surefire way of getting yourself killed. And this is also made by Spike Lee, who's made films like Inside Man, Malcolm X, Miracle at St. Anna, and 25th Hour with Edward Norton. I first saw this movie last year, and to tell you the truth, I was blown away by it. I was really, really impressed with how this movie was made, because not only is it a good story, it's very, very relevant for today's times. Considering how the political climate is right now, I know some people probably wouldn't enjoy going to see this, and I've heard the argument saying that not every movie has to have politics in it. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but if you're gonna go into this movie not wanting that or not liking that, well, I don't know what else to tell you. Because like it or not, as we'll get to later on with the movie's ending, a lot of the stuff that they talk about in this movie, it's still going on right now. And for those of you who haven't seen this, I'm going to go into certain details of the plot, so there's your warning. One thing that really surprised me off the bat about BlacKkKlansman was the good balance of genres and types of stylistic choices that Spike Lee used in this movie, with really dark, heavy stuff, but also a really good balance of comedy too, particularly in the opening scene with Alec Baldwin's character, him messing up between certain takes and we're like, blah, 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 blah. And another funny moment that had me rolling on the floor was when Ron Stallworth calls the KKK on the phone and puts on his white voice and he starts to say, well, since you asked, I hate blah 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 and all that stuff, and every single cop in the room is just stunned and they all turn around to look at him like, what? And Adam Driver slowly turning around, having this confused look on his face, is the best thing I've ever seen. I was just in awe and just completely stunned by that scene the first time I saw it. And even watching this the other day to prepare for this review, I sat there going... And then there's the scene where Ron and his partner Flip, played by Adam Driver, are going over certain dialogue together, how they try to sound like each other in person versus on the phone, because they got to make sure that they sound alike. Otherwise, the KKK guys are going to know the difference between the two and go, hold on a minute. That wasn't you over the phone. Who is that on the phone? The biggest compliment that I could give this movie is not just the comedy and not just the content and how blunt it is and how just really, really messed up the ideology is of certain people, especially the KKK. This movie does an excellent job of balancing both sides of the argument when it comes to race relations and police brutality. I also kind of like how they don't portray the KKK members as monsters. Now, they don't shy away from showing just how messed up their ideology is, but there's this one scene where this one character who's very suspicious of Flip right from the get-go, it shows him and his wife hanging out in their room and they're having this nice little romantic moment together. And it made me go, huh, he almost seems kind of normal. It does a good job of showing that, you know, despite their messed up racist views, they're just normal people. They just happen to have a messed up view of the world and people that are different from them. And it does a similar thing with the portrayal of the Black Panther movement in the area, which Ron Stallworth's love interest, Patrice, is a part of, and I think she's a president of the chair of that local Black Panther group. And it leads to my favorite scene in the whole movie where he finally reveals to Patrice that he's a cop, and she goes,
at least I would be doing something unlike you.
Unlike me?
Yeah!
Don't think just because I don't wear a black beret or a black leather jacket, black Ray-Ban screaming kill Whitey, that I don't care about my people.
Goes to show you that just because you lean one way over a certain side of the argument doesn't necessarily mean that you hate the other side. Well, depending on who you are as a person. As for myself, whatever way I lean politically or socially doesn't mean that I don't understand the other side and where they're coming from. Speaking of that, I don't really like getting into politics and social issues on this channel because that's not what I talk about, obviously, on here. I've been feeling the need to talk about this movie, and I think it's really important to address what's going on. And I'm gonna try to not get on my soapbox because I understand that this is a very heated topic to talk about. And I honestly don't think that there's really any good, clear-cut answers on this. However, it is rather disheartening to see the things that have been unfolding in the United States for the last couple of months. It's a really touchy subject to talk about, and where do I stand on it exactly? Truth be told, I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm tempted to say that I'm really in the middle on this because I have black friends in real life and I really, really care about them deeply. On the other side of that coin, I have an uncle who's a cop in New York City for 23 years, and in the last couple of months, he and his fellow officers had been under so much scrutiny and so much vitriol and rhetoric from the local citizens, the politicians up there who are seemingly going out of their way to demonize the police. It's really, from what I can tell, taken a serious toll on his mental state. Seeing all this intensity and all this violence blowing up across the country, it's a difficult situation to talk about, and truth be told, I don't really know if there's a good answer for it, but one thing I do know is that we have to keep talking about this. We can't ignore the problem here. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of people out there, I think, that haven't really learned. And some of them are just ignorant, or they truly are racist. I don't know. Again, I don't want to try to get on my soapbox, but if there's anything that's been clear about this whole situation, we have to talk about this stuff. And we have to stop demonizing each other and seeing each other as the enemy. Anyway, back to the movie. John David Washington is really, really great in this film, and I cannot wait to see him in Chris Nolan's Tenet, hopefully coming up soon in theaters. We'll get to that another time. And the fact that he's Denzel Washington's son, before I saw this movie, I had no idea. And then hearing him talk, I went, he sounds kind of like Denzel. And then when I looked it up and realized that Denzel's actually his father, I went, whoa. But when you hear him talk and when he raises his voice, it makes you go, that is Denzel. That is Denzel. And I think the character's very complex because he wants to do good by other people and he wants to help black people in America, but he sees it as the best way to do it is to be a cop and be a positive example for the people of Colorado Springs. As far as Adam Driver's character is concerned, Flip, he's a Jewish person, which causes suspicion for one of the KKK members, but he never really thought much about being Jewish.
I never thought much about being Jewish. Nobody around me was Jewish. You know, I wasn't going to a bunch of bar mitzvahs. I didn't have a bar mitzvah. I was just another white kid. And now I'm in some basement denying it out loud.
And now because of this case, it's all he ever thinks about. Then you have Topher Grace as David Duke, who... the fact you got Topher Grace as one of the most hated people in America, I can't even imagine playing that kind of character, especially for all the actors who are playing the KKK members. That's a hard role to play, and major props to those guys for doing a really great job, because that one guy in particular who's suspicious of Flip, man, did I hate that guy. Topher Grace is really good in this movie, and I like that they do kind of humanize David Duke a little bit. I don't know if any of this is true in real life to his real life story, but according to the movie, his family had a housekeeper who was a black woman, and he felt very sad when she died. Like, as he says, I felt like I lost a member of my family. Again, this movie does a good job of showing that, you know, these guys are not necessarily monsters. They are people. Like I said, they happen to have a warped view of the world. Not only is this movie very funny, but it's also heavy with its content, and also very intense, particularly at the scene where Ron and Flip are at this Ku Klux Klan rally, and one of the guys there recognizes Flip as a cop who arrested him, which makes the tension and possibility of the case being exposed even higher. And the first time I watched it, I was literally going, don't get caught, don't get caught, don't get caught! And the movie also does a really good job of taking itself seriously, despite its very comedic overtones, particularly where one character named Jerome Turner in the movie tells a story of a horrific act to the people in the room that he's talking to. It made me sick to my stomach the way he goes into detail about what happened. If you want to know what I'm talking about, watch the scene for yourself. And since I mentioned the politics of this movie, there is a pretty big reference to Donald Trump, particularly where Ron is talking to his police sergeant and how he goes on this big speech about how eventually people are going to get tired of being labeled as a bigot, and it's going to eventually lead to them voting for somebody who represents their mindset and how they feel like they're being oppressed by minorities and all that stuff. And Ron says, Sergeant, come on. Nobody's gonna vote for a guy like that for the president. That scene strikes a chord with me because I've talked to a lot of people who felt a similar way, where they get tired of being labeled as a bigot and they felt the need to vote for Donald Trump, who they think was going to put his foot down and trying to stop them from saying, that's racist, that's racist, that's racist, and all that. Again, another example of how relevant this movie is for today. And another thing that this movie talks about is the question of systemic racism, particularly with the one cop who's very inappropriate and very mean towards black people in the area. Or Ron asks, why do you tolerate this? You want to be the guy that rats him out? We're family. We stick together. But eventually, they get tired of it and they decide to expose him to the chief of police, where they get him to confess to Ron Stallworth and his girlfriend what he did, and then they get him to say a racist remark, and then Ron reveals that he's wearing a wire, and lo and behold...
Flip, did you get it?
Oh, yeah, I got it.
Chief, do you get it?
Oh, I really, really get it. You're under arrest.
What? Are you out of your mind?
The best scene in the whole movie. So eventually the case is resolved, but they have to drop all the evidence due to budget cuts that are happening in the state. And the film ends with Ron and Patrice having a discussion about where they go with their relationship. They hear a knock on the door, then they go down this hallway, and then they see outside the window a cross burning with all these Klan members dressed up in white. And then it ends with footage of recent times from the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia 3 years ago. This ending, I think, is one of the most powerful endings that I've ever seen in a movie. It literally makes you stop in your tracks and it forces you to think about what you just saw. And I think Spike Lee was basically telling the audience that, no, what you see in this movie, it's not a time capsule into the past. This crap is still going on right now. Whether you like it or not, we are still in this situation. And wherever you land on the political and social spectrum, this movie, I think, is definitely worth your time. If you're worried about it being too preachy to one side of the argument, it's really not like that. And I think if you can just put your political biases aside and actually listen to what they're talking about and enjoy the story and actually take into consideration what each character is talking about, you might be surprised. So those are my thoughts on BlacKkKlansman. What are your thoughts on the movie? Did you love it, like it, think it's alright, or do you hate it? Whatever the case is, comment below and tell me your thoughts, and I'll see you all very soon.